the richest country on earth, sitting on the third largest reserves of natural gas, there are only 250,000 citizens of Qatar, making it home to the world's largest concentration of millionaires. General Jim Jones is a former U.S. national security advisor.
Qatar has emerged from, under the previous emir, from being a relatively obscure, minor player to a position of preeminence.
Martin Reardon opened the first FBI office in Doha. He says it isn't just corporate America benefiting from a relationship with Qatar.
One of the largest air bases that the U.S. has outside the continent of the United States is here in Doha. It's huge.
It's so huge, Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel signed a 10-year agreement to keep U.S. forces here.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Qatar also was a key part of the negotiations with the Taliban to free American POW Bo Bergdahl.
And earlier this week, I was able to personally thank the Emir of Qatar for his leadership in helping us get it done.
The 5 Taliban prisoners from Guantanamo Bay were welcomed in Doha with open arms. A local Qatari told me he has no problem with them. This isn't a surprise.
Happy to see you, sir. Thank you.
Qatar prides itself on its clout with the U.S. and extremists. This YouTube video is one of several showing fighters in Syria thanking Qatari donors for weapons. The Brothers of Madad al-Sham is the name of a fundraising campaign. It contributes to humanitarian relief in Syria. But this tweet last August from an al-Qaeda-linked militia is one of several from al-Qaeda supporters directing followers to donate to the campaign. Juan Zarante is the former Deputy National Security Advisor for combating terrorism.
What you have is the resurrection of charitable networks that had been suppressed post 9/11, but that are being reborn in the context of Syria.
So how big of a player is Qatar?
Qatar is at the center of this. Qatar has now taken its place in the lead of countries that are supporting al-Qaeda and al-Qaeda-related groups.
In April, a Kuwaiti cleric known to support al-Qaeda-linked groups tweeted he was heading to Qatar to raise money for jihad. And just last week, the cleric tweeted this poster, which says, "Our jihad in Syria is financial jihad." It asks for donations in Qatari, Kuwaiti, or Saudi currencies. Saad bin Saad al-Kabi is a fundraiser for the Madad al-Sham campaign in Doha. His current profile on Facebook's WhatsApp, a social media platform, requests donations equal to $1,500 US to prepare a fighter by arming, feeding, and treating him. We called al-Kabi when we were in Doha. He wouldn't meet with us, but he denied the poster solicited money for weapons.
He says that there was no mention of weapons.
It's on there right now.
بيقول إنه حاليا موجودة على الواتساب بس إنه يمكن إيه ما He says he has no knowledge of it.
And when we asked why he used a picture of the planes hitting the World Trade Center on 9/11 in a tweet, he replied, "The picture is everywhere on the internet."
Right. He says that photo is all over the internet.
Al-Kabi told us we couldn't donate to his campaign right now, but would have to give to another charity approved by the Qatari government. He also wouldn't tell us how much money he raised. But in one tweet last summer, he asks Allah to bless the people of Qatar for donating the equivalent of $1.4 million. We don't know where these funds went, but according to the Qatari newspaper Al-Arab, at one point the Madad al-Sham campaign worked with Qatar's Volunteer Work Center to raise money to help Syrian refugees. The work center was supervised by the Qatari government's Ministry of Culture. The minister declined our request for an interview.
So how high up in the government in Qatar does the support for Islamic extremism for these al-Qaeda-linked groups go?
Well, these are decisions made at the top. And so Qatar operates as a monarchy. Its officials, its activities follow the orders of the government. And to the extent that there is a policy of supporting extremists in the region, that's a policy that comes from the top.
This is the Taliban office in Doha behind me. Now, it just opened last year, and no one responded to our many attempts to reach them, so it may just be a storefront. But the fact is this: Qatar is the only country in the region with a diplomatic Taliban presence, and the emir, the ruler of this country, personally negotiated the release of 5 Taliban prisoners in exchange for American POW Bo Bergdahl.
I just want to welcome the Emir of Qatar and thank him and the people of this country for the friendship they've shown towards the United States.
General Jim Jones says Qatar has passed some laws against terror finance, but it's not enough.
They probably are a little bit more towards supporting people that we are a little bit less than thrilled with.
Qatar continues to be a haven for financing extremists. It's no secret the government allows people like Ali al-Nuaimi to live freely in Qatar. Nuaimi was the president of the Qatar Soccer Association, which controversially won the bid for the 2022 World Cup. The United States Treasury designated him a terrorist last year, saying he raised millions to fund terror. Then there's Wagdi Ghonim, a cleric who lived in Orange County, California. The U.S. suspected him of fundraising activities that could support terrorism. Ghonim agreed to leave the U.S. and now lives in Doha, where earlier this year he appeared in a YouTube video soliciting money for Syria with Saad bin Saad al-Kabi.
Why does the United States have to accept Qatar providing harbor to people the United States says are terrorists?
Because going beyond that, in a strategic sense, Qatar is a key ally of the United States.
An ally Martin Reardon says the U.S. can't afford to lose.
So that maxim that you keep your friends close but your enemies closer, it's very relevant to Qatar.
But will the trade-offs cost America?
There's no question that money going to al-Qaeda affiliates and groups hurts the United States. Money coming out of Qatar not only allows these groups to grow in strength on the battlefield in Syria, but allows them the possibility, the budget, to imagine plotting and to actually attack the United States and the West.
It's well known in national security circles, but not by the American people. The fact is, when I ask, follow the money is the old adage. When I ask about terrorist financing, where's the money coming from that's funding these Sunni extremist terrorist organizations, al-Qaeda? Every time it's the Gulf, comes out of the Gulf, and the worst offender is Qatar. They give money indiscriminately, and I think it's a real problem. I just returned from the region. I was in UAE and also Saudi, visited with the Crown Prince. They threatened to pull their diplomats out of Qatar because of the money that they're throwing into the Syrian rebels, which in turn are funding al-Nusra and ISIS, which are the very enemy that we should be fighting in Iraq.
So what I'm trying to understand, Chairman, and I wonder if you can help me a bit, because, we talked about the U.S. companies. They have obviously significant exposure in Qatar. There's also an air base there, which is a very significant base for this country. You heard our guest talk about it in the piece, but the #1 supply location for the military, 6,000 U.S. Air Force members are located there. It is a $400 million annual budget. Even Saudi Arabia, an ally of the United States, does not allow such a base to be in that country. Is this why the United States finds it okay to have these funding activities going on in an ally?
Well, it's a very strange relationship. I think we want to keep them in the tent as much as we can. They do allow intelligence sharing like the Saudis do. But at the same time, you have these wealthy donors, these families that give money. And if you go back to the time of bin Laden and 9/11, the Qataris were giving to al-Qaeda. This concerns me when you look at the prisoner swap of the Taliban 5, one of whom was involved with 9/11 with bin Laden, right. And the other are the top 5 cabinets of Mullah Omar. We're going to send them to Qatar. That raises some really serious questions in terms of our national security.
The question, Chairman, that I have for you, actually, one of our other guests in the piece said, Juan Zarate, who formerly was in charge of fighting counterterrorism finance, he says that money coming out of Qatar could end up being used to fuel the ambition, the dream of attacks against the United States directly. Do you agree?
Well, I do agree with that, because if you look at the #1 threat to the homeland, it's ISIS in Syria and Iraq. It's the biggest training ground, surpassing Afghanistan and Pakistan. And who is funding ISIS? Who is funding al-Nusra? But more importantly, ISIS. That money, and the reason why the Saudis and UAE cracked down on Qatar is because they're the ones throwing the money indiscriminately, not caring who it goes to, as long as it funds Sunni extremists fighting Assad in Syria.